Lateral ventricle. Lateral ventricle is a C-shaped ventricle which is present in each cerebral hemisphere. So we have two lateral ventricles in each cerebral hemispheres, and it is in the form of C. You can see this is the C shape, and it extends from frontal lobe to parietal lobe to the occipital lobe and also to the temporal lobe. So this is present around the diencephalon. So this is the position of the diencephalon where the thalamus and its associated structures are present. So around the diencephalon you can see the C-shaped cavity in the cerebral hemisphere, and it has a central part. This is the central part which is present in the parietal lobe, and this is the anterior horn which is present in the frontal lobe, and this is the posterior horn which is present in the occipital lobe, and this is the inferior horn which is present in the temporal lobe. So it has a central part, anterior horn, posterior horn, and an inferior horn. So it is present around the thalamus. You can see here, this is the thalamus. This is the lentiform nucleus. This is the caudate nucleus. So this C-shaped cavity is present in the cerebral hemisphere around the thalamus, lentiform nucleus, and the caudate nucleus. And it connects with opposite lateral ventricle with a cavity. So this is the with a foramen that is called interventricular foramen of Monro. So this interventricular foramen of Monro, through it communicates with the third ventricle. This is the third ventricle part actually, and this is the lateral ventricle part of each cerebral hemisphere, and it communicates with the third ventricle through interventricular foramen, and meanwhile it also communicates with the opposite lateral ventricle. So first we will discuss about the central part. So this central part, it is present in the parietal lobe. This is the parietal lobe, and it extends from interventricular foramen. So you can see a gap here. So this is the interventricular foramen. From the interventricular foramen anteriorly to the splenium. So this part is called splenium of corpus callosum. So to the splenium of corpus callosum. From this part to this part, splenium of corpus callosum. So this is the central part or body of the lateral ventricle. So it is seen in the parietal lobe. So extends from interventricular foramen anteriorly to the splenium of corpus callosum posteriorly. Now we will see the boundaries. So you can see this is the body of corpus callosum. So roof is formed by body of corpus callosum. This is the roof, and this is all the floor. What you are seeing, this is all the floor, and this thin membrane. What you are seeing here, this is the medial wall, which separates the two lateral ventricles of two cerebral hemispheres. So this is called septum pellucidum. Septum pellucidum, and this is the fornix. This is the fornix. So here you can see. So this is the corpus callosum. Roof is formed by the body of corpus callosum, and medial wall is formed by the septum pellucidum. Part is removed, some part is there here. So this is the septum pellucidum, and floor. So here floor is formed by various structures from lateral to medial. So if you see here, the main, you can see a bulging here. This is called the caudate nucleus. So floor is mainly formed by the body of the caudate nucleus. Then adjacent to that you can see a thin layer of white fibers associated with a vein called thalamostriate vein. So these white fibers are called stria terminalis and thalamostriate vein. So from lateral to medial, it is body of caudate nucleus first, then the stria terminalis, then the thalamostriate vein, and you can see all this is the thalamus. You can see all this is the thalamus part. So upper surface of the thalamus. So even inside also some part of the thalamus is there here. So the upper surface of the thalamus forms the next structure in the floor, and then you can see the fornix. So this is the fornix structure. This is the fornix, what you are seeing here. So this is the fornix. So beneath the fornix you can see the thalamus. So these are the various structures from lateral to medial side which are forming the floor. Body of caudate nucleus followed by stria terminalis, thin layer of white fibers which are extending from the amygdala to the anterior nucleus, anterior commissure, then thalamostriate vein and superior surface of the thalamus, and then comes the body of the fornix. And medial wall is formed by septum pellucidum as told. So this is about the central part of the lateral ventricle. Then anterior horn is that part of the lateral ventricle which is present. So this is in front of the interventricular foramen. This is the interventricular foramen. Actually it is communicating from the lateral ventricle to third ventricle. All this is the third ventricle cavity. So it is communicating lateral ventricle with the third ventricle. So this is triangular in cross section. When you cut it, it will be triangular in cross section like this. So it has a roof, it has a floor, and it also has an anterior wall, medial wall, and lateral wall. So roof, you can see the roof. This is the roof. So this roof is formed again by the corpus callosum. So from anterior to interventricular foramen, from here to here, all this is the all this is the anterior horn. So the anterior horn roof is formed by the again the corpus callosum, and its anterior wall is formed by genu. So this point is called genu. All this is the corpus callosum only. So in the corpus callosum we have various parts. So this is the genu of corpus callosum. This is the rostrum, which means the head. Genu means bend. So this is curved like this. So it is the bend, and this is the anterior part of the body. Genu and rostrum. So they are forming correspondingly the roof, anterior wall, and floor of corpus callosum. So this is the roof, this is the anterior wall, this is the floor of the corpus, floor of the lateral ventricle, which is formed by the all these parts of the corpus callosum. Then medial wall, as usual, medial wall is formed by, so this part of the septum pellucidum. This part of the septum pellucidum forms the medial wall here. Some part is cut and some part is present. And then lateral wall. If you see on the lateral wall, there is a bulging. There is a bulging. So this bulging is nothing but the head of the caudate nucleus. This is the head. Actually, all this is the body of the caudate nucleus, which is forming the floor for the central part. So this head is forming the lateral wall for the head, lateral wall for the lateral ventricle. So this is about the anterior horn. Anterior horn. Then coming to the posterior horn. As said, posterior horn extends into the occipital lobe. So this posterior horn, it is quadrilateral in shape. In cross section it is quadrilateral. So it has a roof, floor, lateral wall mainly, and also a medial wall. So first we will see the roof, floor and the lateral wall. So here you can see some fibers called tapetal fibers. Tapetal fibers. So this is the posterior horn. So there are some fibers, tapetal fibers. So these fibers are the white fibers which separate the optic radiation. So lateral to that you will see the fibers from medial geniculate body to the visual cortex. Visual cortex. So these fibers, they separate the optic radiations. Optic radiations from the lateral ventricle. So these are the tapetal fibers. So these tapetal fibers, they mainly form the roof, lateral wall and floor of the posterior horn. Roof, lateral wall and floor of the posterior wall. Posterior horn. Then next you will see the medial wall. So this is the medial wall. This is the medial wall. So this medial wall is formed by fibers of corpus callosum called forceps major. Forceps major. So this fibers of the forceps major, they project into the lateral ventricle. You can see these fibers are projecting into the lateral ventricle to form an elevation. To form an elevation. So these are the fibers which are projecting into the lateral ventricle to form an elevation here. So this is called the bulb of posterior horn. Bulb of posterior horn formed by the forceps major fibers. So these are the forceps major fibers and these are the tapetal fibers. These are all the tapetal fibers which are forming the roof, lateral wall and floor. And just beneath it you can see one more bulge or projection formed by the calcarine sulcus. Formed by the calcarine sulcus. So this is the calcarine sulcus which is projecting inside and this forms one more projection into the posterior horn. So this is called the calcar iris. Calcar iris. So calcar iris is an elevation formed by the calcarine sulcus which is projecting into the posterior horn. Bulb of posterior horn is formed by the fibers of corpus callosum, that is the forceps major fibers. So this is about the posterior horn. Then coming to the largest and the longest horn that is present in the temporal lobe, that is the inferior horn. So this is the inferior horn of the lateral ventricle. So this inferior horn begins from a triangular area called collateral trigone. Collateral trigone, where the central horn, this is the central part, this is the posterior horn, and this is the inferior horn meet. So this point is called collateral trigone. So From the collateral trigone, anteriorly it extends into the temporal lobe up to 2.5 centimeters behind the temporal pole. Behind the temporal pole. So this is the inferior horn. So inferior horn is, so what you can see in the inferior horn, you can see two bulgings in the inferior horn. So one bulge, you can see this one. This is the hippocampal bulge. Hippocampus forms a bulge into the inferior horn, that is the hippocampal bulge, and another one is the collateral eminence. Collateral eminence. So this collateral eminence is adjacent to the hippocampal bulge. So these two are the main elevations, longitudinal elevations which we see in the inferior horn. So seeing in the cross section, so cross section of this inferior horn, unlike others which are triangular and quadrilateral, it is just slit like. It is just slit like. So this is the slit of inferior horn, and you can see here the position of various structures. You can see this is the hippocampus. This is the hippocampus, and you can see from the hippocampus a small set of fibers called alveus begin, white fibers, and this alveus actually forms the fimbriae here. So this is the fimbriae, and above that you can see some other fibers. So these are the stria terminalis fibers, and then you can also see the tail of the caudate nucleus. You can also see the tail of the caudate nucleus. This is the tail of the caudate nucleus. So between this tail of the caudate nucleus and the fimbriae and the hippocampus and the alveus, you can see a small opening, a small opening. So this opening is called the choroid fissure. This opening is called the choroid fissure. So first of all, this inferior horn is slit-like. It's a transverse slit. So it is having mainly the roof and the floor. That's it. So this is the roof. This is the floor. Whatever structures which are formed here, this is the floor. So roof is mainly formed by stria terminalis. This is the stria terminalis, and then you have the tail of the caudate nucleus, tail of caudate nucleus, and you have a part of tapetal fibers. All this area is the tapetal fibers. Some of the tapetal fibers will be seen in the inferior horn also. So all these structures, they form the roof. Then floor, you can see in the floor. Floor is mainly formed by the hippocampus. It is mainly formed by the hippocampus. So all this is the hippocampus which is forming the floor. That is hippocampal eminence. Then adjacent to that, you can see one more small eminence called the collateral eminence. Collateral eminence. So this is the collateral eminence. This is collateral sulcus. So this one is the collateral sulcus which is projecting into the inferior horn of the lateral ventricle to form an eminence. So that eminence, this eminence is called the collateral eminence. So collateral eminence, hippocampal eminence, and you can see the alveus, which are white fibers formed at one edge of the hippocampus, and these are the white fibers, that is alveus. So at one end, you can see the fimbriae. So this is the fimbriae. So all these structures along with this choroid fissure, this forms the floor of the inferior horn. Then next coming to the choroid fissure. So what is this choroid fissure of the lateral ventricle? This choroid fissure is nothing but it is the small gap which is present between the Diencephalon. So this is all diencephalon, right? All this is the diencephalon, mainly formed by thalamus, hypothalamus, subthalamus, etc. And this is all cerebral hemisphere. All this is the cerebral hemisphere. And between these, there is a small slit or a small gap. So this gap is nothing but the choroid fissure. So this gap extends along the medial wall of the cerebral hemisphere, first along the central part and then extends into the inferior horn. So this is into the temporal lobe, which I can't see here. Just I am giving a dotted line here. So this is C-shaped small fissure which extends between the diencephalon and the cerebral hemisphere, uh, deep to the central horn and the inferior horn of the lateral ventricle. It is normally made up of only ependyma. Only ependyma. Ependyma is the lining of the lateral ventricle. So this ependyma is invaded by pia mater covering the brain. So this pia mater also consists of the tuft of capillaries. Tuft of capillaries. Together, ependyma, pia mater with tuft of capillaries is called the choroid plexus. So that is what you are seeing here, the choroid plexus of the lateral ventricle. So all this one you can see some dotted thing. So this is all the choroid plexus of lateral ventricle. So this choroid plexus, it not only extends into the lateral ventricle, but from there it also extends into the third ventricle also. Third ventricle. So extends from lateral ventricle through third ventricle through the interventricular foramen. Through the interventricular foramen, it extends. So here also you can see some tuft of capillaries here. So this is the lateral ventricle on one side and other side. So this is the third ventricle. So this part is the third ventricle. So this is interventricular foramen. So from the interventricular foramen, it is extending into the third ventricle. So this is choroid fissure and lodged with choroid plexus. Then what are the applied aspects concerned? We can see the lateral ventricle by taking a CT scan or MRI, which you can regularly do, and ventriculography means by injecting an radioactive material into this CSF either through lumbar puncture or through blood. You can take the pictures of the ventricles, whether they are normal, dilated, or shrunken, or if there is any obstruction like that. So this is ventriculography. So air encephalography, an oldest model where air is introduced through lumbar puncture into the subarachnoid space and then x-rays are taken. So it is also called pneumoencephalography. So by this all these methods you can see the lateral ventricle, of course any other ventricle also. Thank you.